Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, permissioned blockchains have gained popularity as an alternative to open distributed networks, and as a result, they're attracting institutional investment by ensuring security through restricted access. Now, although permissioned decentralized finance, or DeFi, could ease the transition for traditional finance players into the blockchain industry, it is undoubtedly a departure from the core ethos that drives the development of permissionless blockchains. Blockchains like THORChain, which is a non-custodial decentralized exchange that opens access to native and cross-chain liquidity. And permissioned chains that offer the familiarity standards of security, privacy and control that financial institutions are used to. By that very nature, permissioned DeFi is an oxymoron, recreating the restrictions of the traditional financial system that DeFi was actually designed to bypass. And such permissioned protocols may attract institutional support, but inevitably they stray from the open, transparent and equitable ethos that is championed by permissionless blockchains. And I appreciate a lot of what I've just said will go over the head of some people listening because they find the space intimidating, overwhelming, because people just expect you to know all about it. So today I want to put it all in a language that everyone can understand, so when they see these stories in their newsfeed, they understand why it is such a big deal. So today I've invited Pedro Isaac Lopez, Chief Growth Officer at THORWallet's DEX, the gateway to THORChain and the non-custodial DeFi wallet to offer cross-chain swaps. And today we're going to advocate the position that if it's not permissionless, then equally it's not decentralized. And that can only mean it's centralization masquerading as innovation. And I think this is something that everybody needs to be aware of right now. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Switzerland, where Pedro is waiting to talk about how decentralized blockchain networks maintain security through over-collateralization without sacrificing open access for everyone. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Pedro. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yes, thanks, Neil. Happy to join the show. I'll start with a short intro. I have a technical background. I studied industrial engineering in Mexico City. Later, I achieved a master's degree in management from a university in Germany called European Business School, and an MBA with focus on finance and strategy from the University of Pittsburgh. Furthermore, I'm a self-taught developer. I'm deeply interested in both finance and technology, and that's why when I found blockchain, I was enamored. Currently, I am the Chief Growth Officer for THORWallet DEX, which is a non-custodial wallet and decentralized exchange. My main goal is to drive user adoption, both in our mobile applications and in our web app. Additionally, I'm highly involved in product development and strategic planning.
Well, it's a huge pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And I love how your story has taken you everywhere from Mexico, Pittsburgh, Germany, and I believe you're in Switzerland that we're talking to you today. And we will have people listening from a variety of backgrounds and different countries. So just to set the scene for our conversation today, can you tell the listeners a little bit more about exactly what a decentralized exchange is and how it differs from a centralized exchange? And the reason I say that is I'm conscious there'll be a lot of people listening that may be business leaders that may be outside of this space. Maybe they want to know more, feel a little bit intimidated by it and a lot of the terminology. So I thought if we could set the scene right from the offset and hopefully get everybody on board and ideally increase adoption, like you said a few moments ago.
Yes, sure. So a decentralized exchange called also DEX is a type of cryptocurrency exchange that operates in a decentralized manner. That means that it does not rely on a central authority or a middleman to facilitate transactions between buyers and sellers. Instead, a decentralized exchange uses a peer-to-peer network and or smart contracts to enable users to trade cryptocurrencies directly with one another. In contrast, a centralized exchange is a traditional type of cryptocurrency exchange that is operated by a central entity, which is usually a company. They act as intermediary between buyers and sellers. A key difference between decentralized exchanges and centralized exchanges is custody. In DEX, the user has full control over his assets. On the other hand, In a centralized exchange, the user transfers his assets to the exchange. Self-custody is generally regarded as the safest option. However, it also comes with its own challenges. So a user who does self-custody of their assets must also have good security practices of their private keys, among other things like avoiding clicking on websites or approving unknown contracts, because mistakes can be very costly. Keeping self-custody is still a bit challenging, and that's why companies like ours in THORWallet DEX and others are working to develop better and more user-friendly interfaces so that we can increase adoption.
And for some people listening outside of this space, it's kind of got a perception of being like the wild, wild west of the internet days when it first arrived on the scene. And with the recent talk globally about the regulation of cryptocurrencies, can you tell me a little bit more about how decentralized exchanges, or DEX, are reacting to this, and how does self-study fit into that narrative too? Because that's what people are seeing in their news feeds, right?
Yes. I think the impact of regulation towards cryptocurrencies has been felt more in centralized exchanges. And that is just natural because a centralized exchange is a single entity. On the flip side, regulating a DEX is way more complex.
Yeah.
What has happened is that some DEXs have limited access to some crypto assets in their websites in order to ensure compliance. So, for example, they will not allow you to select or trade certain assets just because they feel that these assets might be considered as non-compliant. Eventually, I think if pressure scales, we could end up in a position where users are denied access to certain websites based on their geolocation. This won't be a silver bullet though, because users can still use a VPN service and still access websites. So in reality, it is way harder to enforce. Additionally, users could still interact with the contracts themselves through the blockchain due to this decentralized nature. Of course, this requires you to be a higher technical person, but it's still a valid possibility. So I think regulation also needs to adapt and understand what are the differences between centralized and decentralized, and you cannot just create one-fits-all regulation. Also, kind of linking it to what we discussed of self-custody plays a critical role in this discussion too, because by enabling users to maintain control of their own funds, DEXs are able to minimize the risks associated with centralized exchanges, so which are often the target of hacks and security breaches. At the end, we and everyone in the space, we are trying to encourage and educate users so that they employ self-custody.
And just to further set the scene and increase understanding of everybody listening so we don't lose anyone here, can I just ask you explain a little bit more about the differences between permissionless and permission decentralized finance, or DeFi as it's better known?
Yes, so permission DeFi requires participants to undergo a whitelisting process that involves identity and background checks, such as Know Your Customer, or aka KYC, with the aim to be compliant with different policies such as anti-money laundering regulations, which kind of are standard in the traditional financial industry. In this way, compliant conscious institutions can be assured that they're trading with parties that have been vetted. An example of permission DeFi is called Aave Arc, which is one subsegment of Aave, which is a DeFi protocol. So far, the market for permissioned DeFi is very small at the moment. In my view, permissioned DeFi makes little sense because you get all the disadvantages of blockchain, and at the same time, you lose its biggest advantages. So the core tenets of DeFi, which are decentralization, permissionless, and self-custody, are what makes DeFi attractive. A blockchain is nothing more than a database. So if you remove the permissionless aspect, then most of the times you're better off making the same system in a traditional IT setup with a normal database and a private network, for example. And now we're talking about DeFi, but this is a phenomenon that we saw before. Around 2017, 2018, there were several attempts to create private blockchains, like Ars Recorda, which was made by a consortium of banks, or Hyperledger from IBM, among other different smaller private blockchains that were developed. None of them achieved really any significant adoption, and this kind of links to what I was saying. So doesn't really make a lot of sense, because when you have a private blockchain or a permission DeFi, you lose a lot of the benefits of why the technology exists.
And just to further expand on that, is there a material change to how DEX operate on permission versus permissionless networks?
So yes, the main difference is really that permission decentralized exchanges, they have this requirement that you need to be whitelisted. Otherwise, you can just not access and transact in those networks or in those protocols. From one aspect, I can see how some processes could really benefit from permission DeFi by virtue of removing intermediaries. For example, settlement of stocks could be automated, and therefore some cost savings could be realized. However, in my view, permission DeFi is not nearly as revolutionary as real DeFi, because you could create something like that with the current technology without having to really make it a blockchain.
And this feels like a perfect opportunity to introduce THORWallet DEX into the debate here. So where does it fit into things? And have you seen an impact on the ways in which consumers view crypto finance over the last few years?
I will start a little bit with context first.
Yeah, sure.
Necessary for, maybe some people have not heard about THORWallet DEX or THORChain before. So THORChain is a layer 1 decentralized protocol that enables cross-chain swaps. And cross-chain swaps means that you can swap assets that are non-grab assets. For example, swapping Bitcoin for Ethereum. And non-grab is key, because that means that there is no third-party risk in the form of breaches. So in the past, because these assets live in different networks, you needed to grab them. So basically just represent them as representations of Bitcoin on the Ethereum network, so that you could transact Bitcoin in Ethereum. Now with THORChain, which is an open source project, you could just take your native Bitcoin and then swap it for Ethereum without having to wrap it, and just everything stays in its own chain, which reduces the risk. And THORChain is a project that is led by a decentralized community of developers and contributors. On the other hand, THORWallet DEX is a suite of products that use THORChain technology as a base layer to provide its services. THORWallet DEX is a non-custodial DeFi wallet that offers, as we use THORChain, we offer cross-chain swaps and provides passive income on native token swaps. By providing complete control of their keys, THORWallet DEX enables its users to move assets between native blockchains. Also, we enable them to earn yield by providing liquidity or participating in a novel multi-chain savings account. The vision of THORWallet DEX is to offer all financial services a person needs, but based on DeFi technology, which is open, fair, and transparent. At the moment, I would say that the majority of our users are crypto natives or crypto newbies.
Yeah.
And we have around 40,000 downloads across our iOS and Android apps, with around 7,000 monthly active users. The end goal for us is to build an app that is easy to use as any other fintech app, such as Revolut or Robinhood. We really want to make it easy for users to use DeFi, and we want to bring DeFi to the masses.
So obviously your mission is to bring DeFi to the masses and get more people on board. So for those people listening that may be on the cusp of checking you guys out, do you have any use cases or more information around the various services and the kind of value that it will offer them, just to, as we said, try and increase adoption here?
Yes, sure. So we offer many different features within THORWallet DEX. So the first and the most basic is just the wallet feature, which is in THORWallet you can send and receive a vast number of assets across multiple chains, including the top chains like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche, Polygon, other Ethereum layer 2s like Arbitrum, Optimism, and many more. All of these in a self-custodial fashion. So you can have your assets, you can send them, you can receive, but you are the owner of your assets, you hold the ownership. Another interesting feature is, as I briefly mentioned, is swapping. So you can swap native assets across chains. Currently, we have 8 chains that are supported for cross-chain swaps. So there's no need to grab the assets and no bridges necessary. So that is kind of an amazing thing. Recently, we also launched a new feature called Savers Vault, which allows users to earn yields on their assets, but with the key difference that they have exposure to only one asset. In other words, there is no impermanent loss, which was a common concern for liquidity pooling. So for a bit of context, so decentralized exchanges work based on something called automatic market maker, so AMM. And users give 2 assets, and these assets then allow for people to just swap without any intermediary. And when you have these 2 assets, then you can sometimes lose money because the proportions of the 2 assets change. So if you started with 50-50, at some point you might have 60-40, which could translate into some loss of funds. With this new Savers Vault, you kind of overcome this challenge. And let's say you have Bitcoin and you say, okay, where can I get yield on my Bitcoin where I am an owner of my Bitcoin? So I don't want to give it to any third party. I don't want to give it to like a centralized party who might misuse it. But now in THORWallet, you can give your Bitcoin, you can get yield on that Bitcoin, but you still have ownership on that native Bitcoin. And the yield comes from swapping that happens on the pool. So that's an interesting feature that we just released. It has been very popular. There's less than 3 months ago that was released by THORChain, and there is around 20 million assets now in total value locked, which is quite some nice adoption happening. Also, we have some other functionalities like liquidity pooling. We also provide a fiat and on-off ramp for crypto assets with certain limits. So you can enter with fiat and buy crypto without having to do KYC if you're below certain levels. And we also provide the ability to swap between EVM assets. So across different chains, but only EVM assets. And to our listeners who are crypto enthusiasts, I would just ask if go and check us out, download the app, and I would be happy to hear their feedback and see how they're using it and if they like it.
And if we zoom out for the moment, just look at the bigger picture here, can you tell me a bit more about how DeFi projects like THORWallet, DEX and THORChain are more inclusive than that traditional financial system that we were raised with?
Yes. So blockchain technology is being used by DeFi projects like us, THORWallet and THORChain to build an open, transparent and permissionless networks that enables a more equitable financial system. By removing the middleman from the financial system, banks and financial institutions, if we remove the middleman from financial systems such as banks and financial institutions, DeFi projects can become more inclusive. In conventional finance, intermediaries frequently serve as gatekeepers, making it challenging for those without significant financial resources to gain access to the same services and opportunities as those who are more wealthy. DeFi projects, on the other hand, enable anyone with an internet connection to engage in a financial system without requiring authorization or consent from a third party. The transparency of DeFi projects is another important aspect. Every transaction is recorded on a public ledger that is open to everyone thanks to the blockchain technology. This entails that users can check to make sure their money is being spent for what it was intended and that the network is free of fraud. Its openness can promote trust and guarantee that everyone using the network is treated equitably. DeFi projects may also be less expensive than traditional finance. Transaction costs could be considerably reduced with the absence of intermediaries, which would make it more feasible for regular people to engage in the financial system. DeFi initiatives can also be more productive because they can run continuously without human oversight or approval. And one example of this is cross-chain, cross-border transactions. So right now you want to send dollars to pesos, or this is still quite an expensive transaction because there's a lot of middlemen. This is one of the examples of a use case where DeFi could really benefit and make more accessible for people to enter the financial system just by having an internet connection.
And today's conversation for me was always going to be about demystifying this space, educating people who may be intimidated by this space to help increase adoption. But I'm also aware there's going to be a lot of people listening from your community that they know all about this stuff, but they probably listened all the way through in the hope of hearing a few teasers about the future or what they can expect from you guys in the future or this year. I appreciate you're probably locked down to NDAs. There's not going to be too much you can share, but is there anything you can offer to your community members listening on what they can expect this year?
Yes, sure. So we have a lot of things planned for this year. We're very excited. One thing that we have been working on recently is we are doing a completely revamp of the mobile applications. So we will have a new design that will include better functionality and just easier to use user experience. So that's one of the things that we are very excited about. The other thing is THORChain will release its new feature, which is borrowing and lending. So that's also that we are interested in, and we will integrate in the near future, perhaps around Q2, if it's released as per planned from THORChain side. And another thing is we are also introducing an affiliate feature. So right now our business model is we take a small fee whenever there's a swap or whenever people add to the liquidity pools. And now we will introduce an affiliate feature where you could also participate, and if you refer some people, you could also earn part of that revenue. So sharing the revenue and then allowing for it to grow further. So those are some of the things that we are in the short term looking to, that we are very excited about.
Fantastic. Well, a big thank you for taking the time to share your story today. And one other thing I'd love to ask you before I let you go today is this real passion on everyone to be in a state of continuous learning, especially in your space, that it moves so quickly, and what was so hot last year is not so hot now, and there are different technologies emerging all the time. So I've got to ask, as somebody in the heart of this space, where or how do you self-educate?
Yes, continuous learning is a must, especially, as you said, in a fast-paced environment such as tech development and blockchain.
Yeah.
Mentally, I like to structure it in two main segments of learning. So the first is business and personal growth. For this segment, my main focus is reading. So I like to use audiobooks, and I like to read a lot of them. So I try to minimum get 1 to 2 per month. Currently, I'm reading How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. The second segment is technical. So that includes like learning new libraries, new frameworks, new technologies. And for this segment, I use a number of open source resources. So for example, I like to use Coursera, as they have a good library of free courses from good universities. And then you can learn a lot of different topics, especially in the tech area. And one other last tip, I think one highly underrated resource I use is Twitter. So a lot of people produce a really amazing content on Twitter, and you can leverage Twitter to find cutting-edge research and tech resources. So I would encourage people to spend some time customizing the topics they follow on Twitter and creating the following list to enhance their overall experience. You will definitely see a lot of value coming from that, and a lot of things that you didn't know that was happening, but you will get recommendations. And I think that's a very underrated resource.
Well, a huge thank you for joining me on the podcast today. And finally, for anyone listening wanting to carry on this conversation, maybe with you, maybe with your community, maybe they just want to dig a little bit deeper and find out more information about the value it can offer them. So whether they want to have a look around the website or join your community, what are the best ways of doing that?
Yes, so they can, if they want to have some general information, they can visit our website at THORWallet.org. Or they can follow us on Twitter in THORWallet DEX. We're very active in Twitter, Discord, or Telegram.
Well, I'll add all those links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easy. But love chatting with you today, and especially how you've managed to demystify how decentralized blockchain networks maintain security through over-collateralization without sacrificing open access for everyone. We've covered a lot in a short amount of time, but I think we managed to do it in a language that everyone can understand, and it is my hope that in some way that helps bring more people into this space. So just a big thank you, Pedro, for taking the time to share that with me today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Neil.
Wow, I cannot thank Pedro enough for coming on the podcast today. And because we both took the time to sit down and put this in a language that everyone understands, I hope we achieved our mission today, was that everybody listening knows the differences between permissioned and permissionless DeFi. But over to you. If there's any other subject you'd like us to demystify, take a deep dive in, I'm open to anything. So if you want to come on the podcast to talk about anything, maybe you've got a few different views about anything we talked about today, whatever it is, my door is open to each and every one of you. So please email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com. Send me a question, record me an audio message, or if you want to come on the podcast, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram @NeilC.Hughes. But that's it for today. It's time for me to line up another guest for tomorrow. But a big thank you for listening today as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.